Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand. I'm Anand Narasimhan, and ladies and gentlemen, we keep the spotlight trained on what is happening between India and Canada, especially with the Canadian goons, and increasingly more and more evidence popping up that there are elements who are inimical to Bharat who are propping up these gangsters, and they're nothing but organized crime lords who are doing this under the garb of a so-called political ideology just to profiteer. Multiple angles emerging out of this. Is there an ISI hand in the killing of Hardeep Nijjar is one aspect, but more importantly, the propagandists against Bharat jumping onto the bandwagon and moving away, perhaps a departure from their bleed India strategy to a tease India strategy. Now, all these aspects we will cover, but let's quickly go across because we've got people who not just talk well, but talk quite a bit. So we increase the talk time on the show today and reduce the explanation time. Anand Ranganathan is with us. We've got Adit Kothari and we've got Sushant Sareen who've been following these developments over the last 3 weeks plus. On the one hand, Namaste and Jai Hind, gentlemen. On the one hand, we've had Justin Trudeau embarrassing himself. He's copying a lot of flack back home. But on the other hand, there is also another aspect that perhaps is now being openly talked about, that this entire lot is nothing but a bunch of goons and gangsters who have just come together. It's a committee of gangsters and goons, and now largely Canadian goons. Let's start with Sushant Sareen and then we'll bring in the other A's. Yes, Sushant.
Yeah, so Anand, these guys have always been a bunch of goons. They have moved up the food chain. They have now started occupying positions in government, in the administration, in the local police force. But their main business remains mafia-like operations. They are into gun running, drug running, all kinds of other nefarious activity. Most of the street violence, the gang violence in Canada has found many of these thugs to be involved in those incidents. And yet, these are the very same despicable elements who now it transpires. In the case of Nijjar, for example, he was in constant communication with the Canadian Intelligence Service, the CSIS.
Yes.
And his son claims that for the last many months, the CSIS guys were meeting him once a week, sometimes even more in a week. And why were they doing that? What was the reason? Why would they be going and meeting a plumber so many times? What were they trying to get out of him? Obviously, were they coordinating some kind of operations? And then you have to start asking very serious questions. Was he an asset of CSIS? And maybe an asset gone rogue, and maybe it was CSIS who bumped him off. Who knows? We are all into conspiracy theories and credible allegations. And as allegations go, this one is as credible as the one which Justin Trudeau is hurling, right? So we don't know. Maybe it was CSIS. Maybe it was somebody else. Maybe it was the ISI who bumped him off. Who knows? That let's bump off this guy and this creates more bad blood. Maybe it was pure and simple gang violence. We don't know what it was, right? And nobody knows because no evidence has been presented. The investigation has reached nowhere. But Anand, the important thing is that many intelligence agencies, especially Western intelligence agencies, MI6 is notorious for this. Apparently, CSIS has jumped into the same game. The CIA has done this on many occasions and probably still does it, that they hobnob with criminal gangs, they hobnob even with terrorist groups. And they make use of those terrorist groups and those criminal gangs for their own purposes. The CIA has a very dubious history of involvement with the entire narcotics network. They have used drugs for a variety of purposes, including to fight wars. For these guys to then act and talk about, rules-based order, we are a rules-based society, there's a rules-based international order, I don't know. At times like this, I'm speechless, and the only speech I know is Punjabi, which I can't speak on your channel. But really, it's so frustrating to hear this superciliousness, this supercilious tone, and then that entire Western media network, right? They are such a bunch of, again, I don't want to use Punjabi. They are such a bunch of, low lives. These Western media, they are the biggest lapdogs that you can ever come across. Spit and swallow and vomit journalism is practiced by these guys. They never ask even a counter question. They've never asked, why was the CSIS going and meeting this guy? Okay, if this guy had a threat on his life, you went and informed him once. You could have stayed in touch with him over the phone. Why were you going and meeting him all the time? Why wasn't the local cops meeting him and taking care of his security? Why haven't you asked these questions? Why haven't you asked, why was a plumber put on a no-fly list? What was the reason for it? There are so many questions which have simply not been asked. Why? And they've, and one last point, Anand, there is this colonial, this rag with a colonial hangover called The Economist. It comes up with this, and it's constantly agitating this anti-India kind of a narrative. And it has editors who claim that they are, very, very clued in. And they say that, and when we talk about how the Western media and the Western governments operated in Iraq on basis of virtually zero intelligence, they have the audacity of saying, but all intelligence is not perfect. But when it comes to India, this intelligence is perfect intelligence, enough for the Canadian Prime Minister to stand up in Parliament and accuse India, but not produce any evidence. This is perfect intelligence. They go and attack a country, kill millions of people on what they call, but the intelligence was imperfect. But now it's perfect. How does that work?
मैं करूं तो सही, तुम करो तो गलत is one aspect, but Sushant Sareen, you also made a very interesting point. The one is that there is no credible proof, no evidence that India has done it, and the sentiment in Bharat is that if there is credible proof, then people will only be happy. Why did you say that?
No, which is, look, it's a fact. This is number one. Covert operations like this are carried out by all countries. For any country to act as holier than thou, do it. That is part of statecraft, that you never admit that you carried out these kind of operations. The British do so many things. They never admitted. The Israelis do it. The Israelis have never admitted that they've carried out any kind of a hit themselves. All countries maintain plausible deniability. That's par for the course. So if India has done it, and India will continue to maintain plausible deniability and keep denying as long as it's necessary.
Right.
But if if the rest of the world comes to the feeling that actually it was India which carried it out, I think the message goes across that don't trifle with us, and the message goes across within the country that yes, the government is now taking steps to ensure that people who harm India, who kill Indians, are not going to get away scot-free simply because they are living in the cool climes of the West under Western protection, working as agents of Western intelligence agencies, incidentally.
Right.
And this falls into place, Anand. The Indian government, in its statements on this whole Canadian fracas, has said very clearly that they have found the activities of Canadian diplomats to be extremely suspicious. Number one. Number two, there has been a report in the Indian press, and not in some rag, which says that at the top levels, Indians told the Americans that we think Nijjar or Gurpatwant Singh Pannu is a CIA man. So clearly, the gloves are coming off on all sides.
True, they are. And let's take this conversation forward. A plumber who was refused citizenship twice, Anand Ranganathan, now gets so much of importance from the CSIS and also from the Prime Minister of Canada. That's one aspect. The other aspect is the kind of amplification that we are seeing from Pakistan. Why are the Pakistanis jumping at criminal elements like this? Why are they getting into and trying to create this entire propaganda? Is that opportunism? Is there more to it than meets the eye? And as things unfold, would you limit it only to the ISI? Or would you say that the Five Eyes somewhere have used these elements as a geopolitical tool against Bharat?
Yeah, good evening, Anand. Good evening to my fellow panelists. First of all, can I please highly recommend that you buy a beeping machine whenever you have Sushant Paji on the show and it deals with Trudeau and his stupidities, because who knows? He is, yes, he is out and out Punjabi, and he's done it before, by the way. He's done it before with a Pakistani panelist, and he might do it again. So
You keep
please.
reminding people of that.
No, but as I say, Anand, uh, you know, it's a bit like when they say that a police has to be right every time a terrorist only once. So like that, a theorist has to be right every time a conspiracy theorist only once. And there are so many, as Paji said, Sushant said, there's so many conspiracy theories floating around. Anything could be possible, but having said that, Canada has what is called SIS, Security Intelligence Service, and Pakistan is inter-service. So ISI and SIS are possibly interchangeable. You never know. And besides, if India has Ajit Doval, Canada has Sundar Pichai. This is the level of expertise and professionalism Canada possesses when it turns out their head of state is accusing us of killing a Canadian citizen based on intelligence gathered through Google searches. And now it is looking increasingly likely, as you said as well, that it was possibly Pakistan's ISI that plotted to kill Nijjar so that Trudeau would be dumb enough into believing that it was India that eliminated this Canadian citizen. And by the way, a Canadian citizen who got the citizenship decades after being in Canada, who was put on a no-fly list, something that is done for criminals and terrorists, who authoritatively bombed and assassinated innocents in India and formulated kill lists of Indian diplomats, who wanted the breakup of India, and finally, who was kept in weekly touch by the Canadian intelligence. Honestly, I'm not surprised that the same Canada felicitates Nazi war criminals inside its parliament. And as for Justin Trudeau, just to add to what Sushant has said, the only thing lower than his credibility is his intelligence. He has single-handedly ruined Canada's relationship with India, possibly for years, if not decades to come. And for what, Anand? For piddly little gains in Canadian electoral politics? In 1985, Khalistanis, as you know, blew up Air India Flight 182, killing 329 innocents. Trudeau's father refused to hand over AI-182 bombers, including the dreaded terrorist Parmar. And you know what his reason was, or excuse? That India is not deferential enough to the Queen. Fast forward to 2023, and Justin Trudeau, his son, just like his father did 3 decades ago, is bending over to Khalistani terrorists just to placate the increasingly influential vote bank. And Trudeau is the same guy who congratulated America for killing al-Zawahiri. He said, and it's important to quote him, quote, "Killing of Zawahiri is a step towards a safer world. Canada will keep working with our global partners to counter terrorist threats," unquote. But when it comes to someone that India designates as a terrorist, someone who was heading a terror outfit, suddenly Trudeau enters the apoplectic fit. So, just to answer that question, to extend it, when you said, if it is known authoritatively that India did indeed kill this terrorist, what would be the optics be? As I said, Nijjar to jhaki hai, Dawood Ibrahim baki hai. Why shouldn't India do what bona fide Western democracies have been doing for decades? Killing terrorists on foreign soils. Why shouldn't we? That's the question that everyone must ask. Enough of this hypocrisy. And why was Trudeau quiet, by the way, when ISI killed the famous Baluch activist in Canada? And earlier, it's the same Trudeau. Honestly, one can go on and on. Anand, but just 30 seconds, displayed his monumental ignorance when he supported the anti-farm reform protest without realizing that our farm bills were all about giving farmers a choice like what Canadian farmers have. Anand, the fact is, Trudeau is doing nothing to stop the funding of secessionist groups in Canada who want to foment trouble in India. Even Congress's Captain Amrinder and Manish Tiwari, whose own father was tragically killed by Khalistani terrorists, were angry at Trudeau. Remember how Captain had refused to even meet Trudeau's Minister Sajjan for this very reason? And now the attack on our temples, our embassies, the making of all these kill lists of our diplomats, the grisly tableau showing Khalistanis gunning down our ex-prime minister. And what does Trudeau do? Nothing but bend over backwards for Khalistani terrorists. This is God just desserts for him, I think.
But somewhere, Anand, may I ask you, do you think Justin Trudeau would have done it on his own? Or has he been led up the garden path by a more powerful ally among the Five Eyes? And does that not then point out that these goons and gangsters get citizenship or safe havens in places which include the Five Eye nations because it's being used as a political tool against Bharat?
Well, one can answer it two ways. One, that yes, Trudeau is lacks the intelligence to always be, led down the garden path, and there is evidence to support that theory. But the other is, and I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, that he's also looked at this as his own individual and party's gains. And that is the reason why, if you look at, what Jagmeet's utterances have been, what other associates of Trudeau's parties have been, they're all in it. So yes, even though the Five Eyes might have led him down the garden path, or ISI's hand is involved in this, or the Chinese, or anybody else, Trudeau has also looked at his pound of flesh in this.
Hmm. But Adit, there is also this aspect of a Gurpatwan Panun who's on Canadian soil, an American citizen on Canadian soil, threatening Indo-Canadians with their life or asking them to leave. Justin Trudeau has said nothing. The responses of this entire goon threat and this entire business, organized crime business in the UK from Rishi Sunak is very different, based a report that came in internally within UK, compared to how Canada has reacted. So how would you read the situation, Adit? And would you blame the ISI solely for all of this? Or somewhere do you think that even Bharat and its government has perhaps been a little lax in allowing a free run for these gangsters to run their organized crime business and network from within jails, from all around here? The crackdown has started since August 22, but has enough been done closer home?
Look, there's not an iota of doubt that UK is a bit more rather proactive in sort of mitigating this issue. We saw how Ofcom essentially took down the Khalsa TV in 2022. After the meeting between Liz Truss and a counterpart. So they have done a little bit, but then again at the same time, the security apparatus hasn't come down fully on those miscreants who vandalized the Indian High Commission in March of 2023. So there is a bit of laxity from the security apparatus perspective. The mayor of London, he is quite supportive of these goons at the end of the day. And like you mentioned, this prevent report, which was essentially provided to the parliament not very long ago, a couple of months ago, which essentially points out that these Khalistanis, they're very tiny in number, but they are extremely nefarious and extremely feral and vicious in their approach, and they are extremely harmful to the civil society in general. But going back to the ISI subject, this is where I'm going to take over Shashank Paji's seat. We have to provide a bit of context to the ISI angle. So this was, we'll have to go back to 1971, where Pakistan has badly been defeated, and they've realized that they cannot actually win a conventional war against India. So they come up with this plan called Operation Topak, and that is essentially to balkanize India with 1,000 cuts. And the Kashmir and the Khalistan movement are essentially part of that nefarious agenda, that military doctrine. And these are well documented, military doctrines. So where the cost of it or the investment is low and your yield is high, you're using other state actors or other non-state actors. You're arming them with weapons, you're giving them financing, you're giving them with training in Nepal, in Bangladesh, in Burma, all of these places. So one particular role that was essentially played here was by a gentleman called Jagjit Singh Chauhan, who met Bhutto in 1972. This is, when Bhutto is still negotiating the peace deal on the Shimla agreements. And that is the point where they are actually negotiating how to build up the Khalistan movement, how you can essentially use Nankana Sahib as the door to Punjab to sort of infiltrate into Indian Punjab and create ruckus. Now let's forward this to contemporary times. The links with Pakistan are very well established. You've had gangsters like Lakhbir Singh Landa, Goldie Brar, Arsh Dalla. All of these people have established link with ISI. What are they doing in Canada at the end of the day? That's a question which somebody should have asked, the media should have asked, and it's never been asked. In my opinion, Hardeep Singh Nijjar was, he commanded a certain amount of power and certain amount of respect in the community, and he was a little hedonistic, and he did not want to yield any space to the to the ISI when it came to the sort of, sharing the drug loot or, the immigration scam loot or whatever it is. And this is where I think they got a little pissed off, and which is where this particular theory is essentially coming that you have a lot of retired military officers, right from Havildar level to right general level, essentially living in Canada. Could have been anybody, but these are questions which haven't been probed so far. But I'm glad that it's now coming to the main foray. Anand,
No, but
Anand, can
yeah,
I add something quickly?
yes, Anand.
Yes, I think I completely agree with what Aditya said, but can I please, I think your question was, if I may, a little bit more broader, and can I answer it? Because as I say, you see, a lesson not given is a lesson not learned. While I congratulate what India's reaction has been to what Canada's allegations were, absolutely, it's worthy from every prime minister down to diplomats to our security services, everyone. The fact also remains, we possibly might find it easier to go after Canada because their voters don't vote for us. We have to ask, and that is where I want your question to be answered, and possibly Sushant Padi would answer it completely, and let me answer it partly. What have we done to kind of push back this Khalistani threat on our soil? And I'm afraid we've been found wanting. These are the same people who fomented the farmers' protest, who tore down the tricolor from the Red Fort. We, in fact, withdrew all the cases against those people. These are the same people who ran over a police station in Punjab. We did nothing. These are the same people who went on a run. And there was a manhunt lasting more than a month for Amritpal, as you know, and ultimately he was caught inside Gurdwara, or he actually came out voluntarily. So, I'm very happy that maybe India has learned its lesson and is going after Canada. But can we not do it in isolation? We also have to solve the Khalistani issue, which is fomenting in India. I don't want us to have solved the problem on foreign soil and it, remaining on our soil. That would be a tragedy. I think that was your question.
Yeah, but somewhere one gets a sense, and Sushantji, final question, your thoughts on this, that in India, there is this sentiment that they are our brothers and sisters, and this is perhaps among Sikhs, this is the sentiment that they are our brothers and sisters. We don't agree with them. We will not stand or support them when they go ahead and do something wrong. But if they come to us for help, we will help them. If they if there is an assault on the Gurudwara, we will stand up against it. We will deal with these elements later. That's one part. That's one sentiment among the larger people. We saw on these calls in Surrey and also in this one, or even in Australia, or even closer home, there is no traction for this entire Khalistani narrative. The other part is the politicization of the Panths or the Panthic groups. Is that also a reason? Why are certain political parties backing these crime lords and these gangsters? Is there a greater threat to it? Or when I say thread, not threat, a greater thread to this entire organized crime business that also leads into the political corridors who are also occupying seats within the SGPC? Sushantji.
So, Anand, on both your questions, see, on the first one, a lot of the support which is given because of intimidation. People are intimidated because of social pressures, intimidated because these guys are menacing. If supposing you have not given them refuge, or you are not stood up, or you're not seen to be standing up with them, you're not seen to be raising your voice, you could be ostracized, you could be threatened, your business could be affected. All kinds of bad things could happen to you. So people are also terrified. Some people would do it for the reasons you said, that okay, fine, I don't agree with the guy, but what do I do? Ultimately, he's my kith and kin, so if I have to help this guy, let me help him, but let me tell him that no more after this. That also happens. It has happened in the past, it's probably happening now. But I think that has to stop, because this cannot be allowed to carry on. It's just not on, because these guys have only grown in strength and power over the last many years. Secondly, and I think that is a lot more problematic, the Panthic politics which is taking place. Again, not anything new. It's been happening for over 15 years now. from around 2005, when the first posters start appearing in the Gurdwaras under the watch of the SGPC. The SGPC backing the cause of some of the most radical elements. How can you be asking for the release of a man, an unrepentant man, not even a repentant guy, not even a guy who says like the people who were involved in Mr. Rajiv Gandhi's assassination, who were extremely repentant about what had happened. Balwant Singh Rajona is not repentant at all.
Correct.
He says, bring it on. And yet the SGPC is leading the charge along with some of these other characters, politicians, who are leading the charge on this whole issue and saying that these so-called Bandi Singhs, what are Bandi Singhs? Yeah? Bandi Singhs, they are trying to give them the halo of some kind of a martyr. How can any government allow this nonsense to happen? So, a lot of these guys who have been involved in political assassinations and who are completely unrepentant, they need to be sent to meet their maker. The punishments against them, which have been carried out after due judicial process, have to be carried out. You cannot, for political reasons and reasons of political exigency, give them a free pass. If you do that, then you are only encouraging more people to come into this thing, and then you will have more political parties saying that, okay, fine, this is something which gets us votes, this is something which gets us traction, so let's take this path. So I think that also needs to be squashed. The SGPC needs to be told where it gets off. The SGPC is only a management committee. It is not the supreme body of Sikhism, and it is only limited to the Gurdwaras in Punjab. It is not, its jurisdiction does not extend to Gurdwaras all over the country. So it's very, very, it's an imperative now for the government to be very clear-headed about how they intend to tackle this. And I just hope they don't try and strike these Faustian bargains with parties like the Akali Dal, who have played a very dubious role in the past and are continuing to play a very dubious role in this. And just one last word, this whole thing, look, we all have family in the West, right? We all have family who are part of the diaspora. But the primary responsibility of the government of India lies to people who live in India and to Indian citizens who might be abroad. People who have renounced Indian citizenship and who have taken the citizenship of another country, for whatever reason, do not have a primary claim over India. It is very, very important for us to understand this. So it is not an obligation. If somebody can't meet his mother, he should not have left his mother. If somebody's father cannot travel, then he should not travel himself, right? Or if the father cannot travel, then it's because the Canadians are not giving him a visa. And incidentally, last point, Anand, when normal people like us apply for a visa to a Western country, they ask us 50 questions. They check our antecedents. They check whether we have any police case or not. They go through a normal vetting process. And yet when it comes to these criminals, these thugs, these mafiosos, these gangsters, they seem to just simply walk into these countries and live in comfort. How does that work? How does that happen? I really want to know how that's working.
They seem to be misusing this entire political asylum clause because a lot of their cohorts, their cohorts are also part of this entire immigration business. Pannoon himself runs an immigration business. So there is a nexus there too. Yes. Yes.
Just briefly, I just wanted this because I think as a layman, I find it very befuddling that, of course, and as I said, I am a layman, I'm not an expert, and there are experts on this panel. But I find it very strange and bizarre that we, as a country, are going after bona fide Khalistanis. And, I applaud that. But at the same time, we have, as a member of parliament, someone called Simranjeet Singh Mann, who openly is a Khalistani and advocates for Khalistan. So I want to ask the two experts here, Adit and Sushantji, should Simranjeet Singh Mann be an MP, a member of Parliament of India? Yes or no?
No, unambiguously no. But unfortunately, under the current rules of business, he took an oath on the Indian Constitution, and only after that he could take a seat in Parliament. Unless you change the law, what do you do?
And freedom of speech is being flirted about with, and even the reasonable restrictions clause.
But
But
there
the
are
other
others,
aspect,
Anand, who might not be avowed Khalistanis or Pakistanis or any other thing, but who also speak against Bharat and India.
yeah,
What do
that's
you do
true.
about them?
Correct. The other aspect is the Indian diaspora is one aspect, but those who have actually given up the Indian citizenship and passport, their responsibility is to with their native nation, and they have left India for a reason, whatever be the reason, economic or otherwise. And you make a very strong point there. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Amazing
I
conversation always.
just wanted to
Yes,
add a
Adarsh.
five
Yes,
second.
yes, yes,
So,
Adarsh.
as somebody who holds an OCI card, myself, I completely second Shashanji's motion on that one, primarily because if you look at the arguments that SGPC is building, is predominantly towards that particular diaspora, which has essentially given up their Indian citizenship, but yet want to hold their agricultural land in India. They want to hold on to their heritage properties in India. And at the same time, they want to run these nefarious agendas in India. Also, just one addition to what Sushantji mentioned about the SGPC, I was extremely, extremely angry to see how SGPC came out day before yesterday, tweeting that that they actually believe in this conspiracy theory that the Prime Minister of Canada has floated in the Parliament just because wo Gora hai, just because he's a white man, and just because he said it in the Parliament, it must be inked in iron. So that is where the problem lies. And I think that duplicity should be called out unanimously in India.
That duplicity, because the person who said that from the SGPC, what are the antecedents in terms of political motivations is also something which you have to see,
Correct.
because it's not an apolitical body anymore. And
Absolutely
that's where it stands out that for playing your game of politics, to what level can you go and to what extent can you go? And are such people, should they be custodians of perhaps a panth that has emerged out of Sanatan Pratha, and for which Hindu families across the board have actually given up their sons and daughters over centuries. So that's something. And should we actually remind them, those people are supposed to be custodians of the Panth, what the tenets of Sikhi and what the 10 Gurus themselves have said, starting from Guru Nanak Dev till Guru Gobind Singh Ji. So at all levels, there are many questions that need to be asked. It's a fascinating conversation, but paucity of time. So with the promise that we'll pick it up again, thank you very, very much, gentlemen. Thank you so
Thanks
much.
very much, Anand.